Bar has been very good. Mondo Vice, plus quite a lot of these. Haaretz has done something staggering reporting. 972, and I'm leaving out Middle East Eye, for which I write. I'm very proud of. And electronic interface. There have been some stunning reporting, and I think that is very significant for the future too.
Yeah, and the whole independent media ecosystem has sort of come into its own with Gaza. I think that ties back to what the guy at the back said earlier. Anyway, he was first. Gentleman there with the glasses.
I've ordered the book, but I've not seen it yet. As I understand it, it's a criticism of the political class as much as the media class. Could you tell us a little bit about what's in the book about the current Labour cabinet and some of the things that you brought to light and who you're most angry about? Because I have my own views, but I'd be interested to hear yours.
So the question is, what does the book contain in terms of critique of the current cabinet?
Before I explain the problems of the current cabinet, which is very substantial, I have to say they're better than the Conservatives. I do think that you studied the early months of the war, and David Cameron coming in as Foreign Secretary and trying to on the basis of some flimsy piece of nonsense from the Israelis suspending funding of UNRWA. Beyond belief, trying to block or trying to hamper the International Criminal Court investigation into war crimes by Hamas and Netanyahu and Gallant. Then continuing to send arms to allow the sale of arms to Israel, trashing the South African decision to take the genocide case to the International Court of Justice, and failing to accept in full the ICJ decision. So what he's doing there is he's supplying arms for what even then there were many very good judges saying this is a genocide. He was sabotaging the international world order. This moral order which had been set in motion by Churchill and Roosevelt. The United Nations, the International Criminal Court, later on the ICJ, UNRWA. All these organisations were being sabotaged in order to support Israel. And I think that, and I have to say that I'm not very fond of, I'm not a great supporter of our local MP here, but they did do three things on coming into office. One of which was to end the disgraceful suspension of funds for UNRWA. They stopped the objections to the ICC cases. And what was the third thing? And then they suspended a small number of arms. That said, this Labour government and the previous Tory one have yet to say even that Israel has committed war crimes. And this is not, they've not managed to say that. And I can see why, because the moment they say it, they upset Mr. Netanyahu. They don't want to do that. Even more, they upset the Americans and upset our special relationship, and then it becomes impossible, I think, for them to sell arms to Israel. But it is astonishing. They will not say that Israel is an apartheid state. They are now colluding with the most barbaric things, these fascist militias going around the West Bank, extinguishing ancient communities. 80 have gone since, according to a brilliant recent Haaretz article, I really recommended a few days ago, have just been extinguished, wiped off the face of the earth. And this is, and so I can't say that I greatly admire what they've done. They have been complicit, for sure. But they are better than Cameron and Sunak.
it's a very low bar, isn't it? And the key thing is that they've continued to run daily surveillance flights,
Yes.
and there needs to be a national inquiry about what those daily surveillance flights. Because the idea that they're there as part of hostage rescue, at 6 hours every day for 2 years is just an insult to the intelligence.
Yeah, I have to say, the work done by Matt Kennard and by Declassified and by Al Jazeera as well, there are huge questions to answer. And the delivery, do we have troops on the ground or advising? That's something which has never really been established. The uses to which anti-British are being put, it's not. And that intelligence gathering, is it being handed? It is being handed to the Israelis. Of course, they can use it.
Yeah. I mean, they're not letting us just sort of fly around to satisfy our own curiosity. Okay, who's next? Taz. If you could introduce yourself, Taz.
Sure, I'm a solicitor based in the UK. But given the International Criminal Court Act, have you sent a free copy of your book to the Metropolitan Police yet? So they can put charges against those who have committed a simple war crime?
So the question there is, has Peter sent a book to the Metropolitan Police?
Can we have a chat about this? I will, with great pleasure. Yes.
Next.
So thank you to both of you for raising your heads above the parapet. It makes us all feel rest easier in relative terms. My question is, have you come across journalists who privately, off the record, have said to you, this is shit, if I wasn't having to pay for a mortgage or my school fees for my kids, I would be on your side? Senior journalists, I'm saying. Both of you.
Could you repeat?
Oh yes, sorry. So the question was, have we come across journalists who within mainstream media who privately say to us, we realise how appalling all this is, we just can't do anything about it?
I think probably the answer is yes. I don't want to, and by the way, it's not that dishonourable a position. You've got a family, you've got a mortgage, you're going to lose your job. I mean, and there are ways. It's very complicated working within an organisation. You have that argument. You're pushing certain stories occasionally you do get them in the paper. You are making it better than it otherwise would have been in terms of the coverage. You're making the arguments in conference. And then you lose some and you win some. It's the same thing, same issue faces an official in the Foreign Office, I'm sure. You're there, are you doing more good in and than out? I can suspect you're disagreeing with me, aren't you, Richard?
But you can feel it. No, I don't know if I understand. I know exactly what you mean. You have to earn a living. But I would point to Owen Jones's excellent work on the BBC, and the Listening Post at Al Jazeera did this as well, where they talked to a lot of BBC people off the record. Yes, who were lots of BBC people who were saying they were appalled. And some of them, of course, have. But Karishma Patel is always very worth listening to. There are people who have stepped out of the BBC because they simply couldn't cope with it. Others, of course, Sangeeta Maiska, a classic example. Yeah. Others have been sacked. That's the price. That's the price you pay. Lady here.
Yes. Oh God. No, I can be saying about the government about being slightly better than Sunak, but because they've had Herzog here, and they had Gideon Saar here, and it's been reported now, I think maybe by Declassified, that the British Army have been sending 12 senior officers to Israel, and also some of their troops have been trained here, and that the British government is looking to pay 1.6 billion to Elbit for their weapons. And I also saw recently that the Metropolitan Police are going to be using drones to go out first as like a first responder, and that was said to me from somebody who found it on an Israeli site because it has Hebrew written on the Metropolitan Police.
So the lady is basically querying Peter's thesis that the Labour Party, the Labour government is better than the Conservative government.
Disagree.
Yes. And also their treatment of Palestine action.
even though they used better language about protesters, they've actually been worse, been more authoritarian. And of course, what you're saying is correct, and I think if there is going to be, when you put together the case against this government, what you've just said is going to be very strong, and it will be hard.
And the degree to which this government thinks we'll be satisfied with very see-through sort of hand-wringing is absurd. I mean, it's, they do their hand-wringing slightly more enthusiastically than the Tories. The situation has also changed. I mean, at the beginning there were no governments in the Western world who were condemning the bombing and so on. And as time has gone on, and particularly in March this year, there was a bit of a turning point when for some reason they all decided it's gone too far now, So there is also a difference between the periods they're in charge.
Yes, there was a genre of commentator who would write in March, when of course the Israelis broke the ceasefire, it's time to stop, it's gone too far. So that it was okay killing the first 17,000 children and the first 50,000 civilians, but now we had to bring it to an end, and that doesn't really work. I don't think that argument. I think you have to admit that you were wrong.
And it's very straightforward when you see what's happening. If you read Bob Woodward's book on the Biden government, all the Israelis want to starve the Palestinians from day one. They really, really want to starve the Palestinians. The only thing Biden and Blinken achieve is to say you've got to keep just enough food going to keep them alive, so that we can kill them, basically. And then what happens when Trump comes in is he gives them leeway to actually starve. And at that point we start seeing starving children. And at that point, it's this is too much. And I think that there's, which is why now the Israelis, to a degree, what they've done since 2007 is you let in just enough food to keep those starving children out of the headlines. I think since the ceasefire, they're letting in about a quarter of what they agreed to let in. It's just enough to keep people from outright starvation, and it's very clear and it's very obvious, and no one reports it. Lady here.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the BBC. I don't understand why, when the Labour government came in, they didn't get rid of all those Cameron appointments. And in particular, Robbie Gibb, who, I just think he's controlling the whole thing at the moment. When you talk to people who work at the BBC, as I did for many years, the control that man has. And the other week I went to a film festival. A friend of mine had a film, and we were with a group of foreign correspondents, some of whom cover the Middle East. Checking on them here, I won't name them. But they were saying the role of the BBC is enormous. They're juniors writing reports. If they're not there to say, hang on a minute, no, this is wrong, you need to check this, check that, they will just do what the BBC is doing. And what the BBC is doing is terrifying. You look at it and you think, how can this possibly be happening? It's so important. I don't understand.
So the question is, why, when the Labour Party came in, did they not get rid of very obviously Tory appointments of the BBC? Also, the question might be added to that, why didn't they get rid of Rafi Berg on BBC Online?
Of course, this is a question which doesn't just apply to Gaza, by the way, because there's been, the way the BBC now reports, basically from a reform perspective, is similar. Something happened. The Tories engineered some kind of coup d'etat at the top of the BBC, and the consequences for Gaza have been horrific. And as I say, it is a question for there's no question that that Bowen and co know what they're talking about, but the editors back in London either don't understand the situation or are blatantly pursuing a quiet agenda, and that's a great tragedy for the BBC. I might just read some the final words almost of damn the moral cowards at the top of the BBC. Samir Shah, Robbie Gibb, Tim Davie, Richard Burgess. Damn you for failing to understand the meaning of the great institution you have disgraced, or why it mattered so much. And I simply don't think, my view is, and I formed this view after talking to the head of news content, Richard Burgess. He clearly didn't know what, I thought he might have understood what was going on. But when we had that conversation in Parliament, Rizwan, he just obviously, he didn't, I don't think he knew what the Dahia doctrine was.
He said he did.
He said he did. Hannibal directive. And so and everything was framed, the Israeli saying this to us, the pro, and this is what the Palestinians, so it's basically trying to find some sort of halfway house between what the Israelis, who quite openly say that BBC is pro-Hamas, which isn't the case. But that's to their perspective. And I think it's tragic. And it did, and I wonder whether the BBC, I know it's awful. And then you have their moral cowardice in not showing those films. And everybody should read the Ben de Pere account of his dealings with the BBC before the Medics documentary was canned. Because they were trying to get him to use, according to Ben de Pere, an interview justifying the Israeli position, which had been obtained under duress. And that's a breach of the Geneva Convention. And also they were getting, the BBC editorial log was saying, oh, but that's Amnesty saying that, or the UN, and so you shouldn't trust Amnesty and the UN. And that is the sort of moral horror which the BBC, according to Ben's account, had entered into. And that, I think, is because they are terrified of upsetting the Israelis. That's my only account I can think of, any explanation I can think of.
Ben de Pere is the executive producer of the Doctors film, which was eventually broadcast by Channel 4. The piece he wrote in The Observer, and also if you get a chance to see Ben talk, it is absolutely horrifying, his insights into the BBC. They were worried about the presenter he was using. They wondered if he could find a Palestinian presenter who could show some evidence of balance in the form of some pro-Israeli tweets. That's what the BBC actually said to him. And there was a lady when Ben spoke at the Frontline Club, and I think she was from Medical Aid for Palestine or something, and she said they'd been, providing, you remember this, they'd been providing stories on the ground and, examples, maimed, mutilated children. And the question was coming back from the BBC, does that baby have any Hamas connections? And it's just mind-boggling. And I think two things go on. One, they are absolutely terrified of the lobby. They are absolutely terrified. But also, Richard Burgess, absolutely at the core of their soul, and it's so deep in their soul, they're not even aware of it. They think the Israelis are us and the Palestinians are them. And it's just a given for them, and it's so deep they're not even aware of it. Who's next? Another hand right at the back there.
How do you defeat the Israeli lobby?
How do you defeat the Israeli lobby? Peter, tell us.
Briefly.
Well, first of all, I think you have to describe it and understand it. And it's a very difficult subject to write about because you immediately get accused of being some form of conspiracy theorist. But what I try to do in the book is describe how it works. And I was very lucky. I was given a helping hand about 15 years ago when Dorothy Byrne of Channel 4, Head of News, asked me to make a film about the pro-Israel lobby in Britain. It's a formidable lobby described by Robert Grote, the Conservative Friends of Israel, and described by Robert Grote James, a historian of great distinction and the biographer of early Churchill, as the most powerful lobby in, I think, Europe or something like that, in the Western world even, I can't remember. But he and how do you defeat it? I think I think you have to defeat it. Well, it's legitimate. There's no reason why Israel shouldn't employ lobbyists to make its points for it and make its arguments. That's a legitimate activity. But I think it should be transparent, and it never has been. The Conservative Friends funding, I go into the funding of the Conservative Friends of Israel. It's very hard to see where that comes from, and and the same would apply to Labour Friends of Israel. And there's been this enormous aversion to even talking about it. So when Al Jazeera did that extraordinary study of the lobby in Britain, including some some filmed evidence that they were where they had an operative trying to bring down Conservative ministers. The film. No papers virtually ignored it, and Boris Johnson, then the Foreign Secretary, just said the matter is closed by the end of the day. There should have been a proper investigation. There would have been if France had been operating in that way, or Russia, let alone Russia or something. There would have been a proper investigation into what the Israeli lobby was doing, and there never has been because people have not wanted to discuss it. And even to mention it has been presented by quite reputable commentators as some form of anti-Semitic trope. Whereas there is virtually no such thing as a Palestinian lobby. And I do a study actually of how the Palestinians are not heard. They're systematically obliterated from debates in the House of Commons and elsewhere, and legislation. And again, I think we have to reconsider that is a scandal and a disgrace. Both the main parties are guilty in this respect, particularly the Tory party, but also Labour. I did think the LFI trip to Tel Aviv at the height of the slaughter was unbelievable, and showed a sort of moral chasm.
Just butt in. I'm going to butt in first.
But it's to add that if anybody wants, Al Jazeera on the 30th of October, Simon Speakman-Caudle did 2 articles and looking at the spin that Israel is using and how they've contracted PR firms in the US, and you're looking at millions of dollars in terms of what they're paying them to spin.
So that's Al Jazeera online on the 30th of
yeah.
October.
Simon
I think one other point though, adding to this, I think one of the reasons Israel gets away with it and is able so easily and readily to make its case is the complicity of the Arab states.
Yeah.
If you actually had UAE, Saudi, etc., making the case for Palestinians, it would be a totally different environment. It's very, I think that latest Woodward book on the Biden administration is utterly fascinating because Blinken goes round the Middle East and Woodward's got the accounts, and they're all completely privately on the same side as Netanyahu. And you haven't got the Arab states as they were in the 70s. They were ready to stick their neck out for Palestinians. It really makes it a much more difficult environment for Palestine.
I'm just going to butt in here. I have a view on this which sometimes makes me quite unpopular. But I think to defeat the Israel lobby, one thing you have to do is to confront head-on the anti-Semitism thing. Okay. Now the world used to be full of settler colonial regimes like Israel. Israel's not a terribly complicated country. What's complicated is our relation to the history of the Jewish people in Europe, which is complicated for very good reasons. But it's a pretty, and Rhodesia, Algeria, South Africa, they all fell one by one. In the late 20th century, to sort of stand up for my own culture and civilization, we decided you can't really do that. You can't just turn up in people's countries and tell them they're second-class citizens and we're going to be the bosses now. With the exception of Israel. only Israel, Susan Abelhauer always makes this point, only Israel survives as a naked, racist, supremacist state. And there is one reason, and one reason alone it's able to do this, because of the cognitive dissonance of the West. And the fact that, sometimes for understandable reasons, people can only approach it through the prism of the Jewish experience in Europe, above all the Holocaust. And it's an enormously powerful weapon, precisely because the resonances of the charge of anti-Semitism are so horrific and carry such enormous power. And the minute you invoke it, no one wants to be on the wrong side of that. But if you are in a situation of ethnic cleansing, maybe there are one or two people who lurk around the Palestine Solidarity movement who have rather stupid, half-thought-through views or whatever. It's kind of irrelevant. If you are in a situation of ethnic cleansing, of apartheid, of genocide, the most appalling, straightforward, racist crimes, and your starting point is always to hurl accusations of racism, not at the perpetrators, but at the victims, then you are trapped in a fundamentally racist paradigm. It amounts to racist gaslighting. It's saying, you say what you object to is the theft of your land and the slaughter of your children, but we know what you're really on about. And everyone in the Western media just says, yes, that's right, you have the right to interpret what people are saying. It is racist gaslighting, and it's obscene, and it has to be pushed back from the first. What you have to do is to do what Zara Sultana says, and says, you are apologists for a genocidal apartheid state. Don't you lecture me about anti-Semitism. You don't do, I'm terribly sorry to say, what Jeremy does, which is say, when you're sucked right back into the appalling world of 2018. Sorry, Jeremy. Sorry, I feel very strongly on that. It puts me out on a limb on the way of that, but I had to have my little rant. Gentleman here.
Thank you so much. I praise Peter for this.
Do you want to
great, no, I can raise my voice. Okay. Not necessary for that. I really praise Peter for this great work, and it's very timely. And actually, I just worked up by the last comment for Peter, who actually brought the issue of the Arab world, which is actually there's no doubt of the complicit of the UK. It's actually they are the reason why this problem initially happened. That's no question of that. But now I think this is the time where we have to search and to research falling short of the Arab world to come in to try to find a solution for this problem. And I think they are complicit. They are whatever, actually even they are running, from the UK and other world in not helping to find a solution for this problem. So my question, whether, I think that's a kind of, a project for Peter and all the journalists to work on, to try to research this area. I hope that Peter could, actually invite other, writers especially from the Arab world, to bring this issue.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, that's the point. I said from the beginning it was a comment rather than a question.
By the way, Mohammed is, you are the ambassador from Sudan, are you?
Yes, that's true.
Former
ambassador from Sudan.
Former.
I'm a diplomat, and I used to be.
I just want to say how our hearts are with your people.
Thank you for that.
And it's hard. It's beyond terrible,
And another place where we have complicity.
That's true. This is very obvious and blatant.
Mike.
Just one point. I don't think you can talk about the Arab world being complicit. I think you have to talk about these regimes which are non-democratic, and the people of Egypt, the people of Saudi, the people are all and whatever are behind the people of Palestine, 100%. And it's their leaders, their regimes that are corrupted, of course, because they're involved in the whole world of international business, etc., have deserted